Well, hi Shane Christie, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks for coming and having a chat with me. It's really exciting to meet you. I haven't watched the All Blacks for a few years, and your name was not a household name in my home, but older All Blacks have been. But your name popped up on the Herald article that I saw the other day outside of the courtroom where Efeso Collins' widow was.
It was a trial, yeah.
It was a trial after his sudden death, and you asked a very polite question and you got hammered in the media. So I had some fun with the story, and then I just really felt that I wanted to connect with you. So tell me a little bit about how you got to be standing outside the courtroom in the Herald that day.
So I was just a Māori All Black. I wasn't an All Black, that's maybe why you didn't know me.
Don't say just a Māori All Black. Yeah, okay.
That was cool, but it's funny, it was 9 years ago and they still use that term in the paper. So how did I end up there? I just came up to watch the New Zealand trial and for the vaccine mandates, wrongful dismissal trial. And I just happened to be outside while they were having the interview with Mrs. Collins, and I only jumped in to ask the question because of what the media was asking her.
Yeah.
But she really was trying to find what the truth was around her husband's passing. And she was looking for questions of how he could have been resuscitated faster with better medical services and that. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if she'd looked into the potential of the vaccine causing her husband's death.
Ah, so you hadn't been very aware of the case going on, you just happened to be in the right place at the right time?
Sort of. I'd read a couple articles during the last month or so.
Yeah.
So I knew that he'd passed, and because of what is going on with sudden deaths in New Zealand and around the world, I just, in my own mind, thought that could be another case. And then it was just a coincidence that that was going on as I was walking past.
You were definitely in the right place at the right time, because the way that all came across, you know, I mean, their session with the Green Party members standing behind looked quite, she looked like she was being protected from any untoward questions actually, and then you were there and their faces changed and they shut it down quite quickly. So it feels like they were on high alert in case anything like that was asked, but the mainstream media wouldn't ask them that question. And what I find really, because I remember when he passed and posted about it at the time, because everybody always goes and makes an assumption we don't know. I mean, there could be other things going on, you know, and so people are really quick to jump to an assumption on our side of the ledger, if you like. And so, but always at the base is a grieving family who may not ever have known all the stuff that we know, right? So it's dancing this dance, isn't it, of being curious, which is exactly what you did. We were so polite and you were so gentle in how you just asked, because she was saying, I just want an answer. I just want my family to know what happened to my husband, right? Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the kinds of questions that the media were asking whilst you were standing there listening.
She was specifically, what made me ask the question, she was looking for truth. And she had desperation in her voice. So I didn't want to just come out with the question, but it was because of the way she was talking to the media. I, in some ways, felt like she was prompting the media to ask.
Wow, that's really interesting.
That's just what I got out of it. So I asked her, but the media was really focusing the questions around like what would be improvements for safety, why was the ambulance so long, did there need to be a resuscitation device there, a defibrillator, those types of questions. What is the process that they can do to improve these charitable events and have safety measures in place?
Yeah.
But I think that if we don't get right to the proper foundation of what the potential death was caused by, all that other stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the statistics in our country with excess deaths, heart issues, cardiac arrests show that there's something else going on.
Yeah.
And like you probably know, we haven't heard any other examples of the reasoning of our excess deaths.
Yeah.
And the media is not really looking for the right questions to find out the truth.
No.
So the way the media reacted towards me, basically abused me.
Yeah.
Said
they tried to defame you.
Yeah, but personally as well. I stood there after the questioning as the family walked away.
Yeah.
And I asked them, why aren't you looking into this
right.
COVID injuries and the potential of Mr. Collins passing being caused by that? And they basically said, I don't give a F about...
This is the media was saying this to you?
One dude in particular.
Wow.
Basically, all the journalists looked blank at me when I asked them personally, why aren't you asking these types of questions? One of them said, I don't give a F about COVID anymore. It happened 5 years ago. which is just not the right mindset to have when we're still looking for answers of what has happened. And if you can't even start with the physical damage, you're never going to find the social or financial issues that are going on in our country.
No.
So to me, they're not fulfilling their job.
Did you kind of get the sense that they knew and they wanted to shut it down, or that, and I'm talking about the media here, or that they just live in a world which is accessing completely different data to us and it just never crossed their mind?
There's two things, yeah. One is they've been bought and paid for by the government. That's clear. And the other thing is, like your point, there's two conflicting sciences and truths about what's going on with data from ACC and our Ministry of Health. They can't explain what the excess deaths are from, and they also won't acknowledge ACC's paid out $12 to $13 million in vaccine injuries. So they are ignoring what's happening. Our government's own data is suggesting there's something seriously gone wrong. And their reaction to my question shows that they're trying to gaslight everyone and ignore the potential of what is going on. They're
trying really, really, really hard to have the dots not join together, right? And then you've got people that are able to join the dots together, but we're not allowed to have a say. So I was digging into a bit more about their Efeso's case after watching your situation on the news, and what it appeared to me was the case itself is about the health and safety of the organisation of the event that he died at. And so it was a fundraising charity event where he was carrying heavy buckets of water, and I think it was run by Auckland Council. And so they would go through their stringent, because it's very stringent now, health and safety practices when you're running an event and all of that, and they would have had to tick all the boxes. And it seemed to me that they had a very narrow scope as to what they were looking at in this trial, which was the way that the event was managed and run. Is that what you understand that it was looking at?
The safety components of the event.
Yeah.
And I can see just from being in the Air New Zealand court case that Air New Zealand are doing a lot of things to try and mitigate dangers and try and provide risk assessments. But again, it doesn't get down to the foundation of issues that we're trying to deal with.
No.
So it doesn't matter how much, if there's a 15%, 12 to 15% excess death in our country, and they don't have answers for that, and they're worried about how to revive people after they've had a severe heart attack. They're not starting from the right depth.
No.
And like you're suggesting, it's more red tape, more resources going towards things that are only perceived to be beneficial from some.
Yeah, well, it's like with lots of things now where we're not going back and honestly unpacking every possible option of what might have happened and having an honest conversation. And then, like in this case, I'm concerned that if this case sets a precedent that maybe they found that something was, they decided, untoward, I wouldn't want to organise an event anymore. If I was an event organiser and I thought, well, I can't be 100% sure of the pre-existing medical conditions, if there were any, of anyone attending my event, and if I'm going to get dragged through the court because someone might be unwell and drop dead on that day, for whatever reason, might be vaccine, it might be anything, that I could have to go through to court about that. Because under health and safety, you've done all your due process. So I feel like people need to realise that this case could potentially change the face of event management.
Yeah, and divide people even further.
Yeah, because everyone just wants someone to blame, right? But when you're not, they need to shift their focus to a wider lens. If they genuinely are looking at how to help this widow, Efeso's widow and family, to understand what's going on, the question needs to be asked. If there's an elephant in the room and genuinely there is a family that is grieving, why is there one thing that isn't allowed to be asked? Because it's usually the thing. And I was doing another interview the other day, and doth protest too much. If you're trying really hard to steer people away from one thing, common sense would say that's the one thing that we really need to hone in and just take a look at. We really hope that it wasn't that. We really hope that it was something else. But the fact we're not allowed to ask the question is media worthy in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. I think their family can get really accurate diagnosis of death through the coroner's report. So hopefully they have someone that's aware of the vaccine damages as their coroner.
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of deaths and causes are being missed, where they're not being diagnosed effectively by people that should be able to look at these things.
A lot rests on the decision of the coroner and how to look at it though, doesn't it? Because I looked up the coroner that was on this case, and there was a case back in 2020 where a police officer got killed, and she decided not to do a coronial inquest into that, and the family were grieving and wanted answers, but she just decided that no, she didn't think so, and so the family couldn't get a resolution. So they hold a lot of power, by the sounds of it, that a grieving family might be overridden in what they get to look at. So that's another area of concern.
Yeah, it is. There's someone that passed with one of the New Zealand Super Rugby teams. His name was Sean Wainui. In 2021, he had a car crash. It was a sudden death. And Alison Goodwin from New Zealand Doctors Speaking for Science sent me a VAERS report.
Yeah.
That stated a 25-year-old male, after training, had a car crash and experienced sudden death. The thing that it says in the VAERS report is he was recently vaccinated 5 days prior. And the other part of the VAERS report says that it wasn't medically induced, so it wasn't affected by a vaccine. So,
right.
But to suggest that without knowing the implications of the vaccine's negative effects, then like you say, we can't get the truth with a coroner's report.
No.
So I've sent that to Sean's family, his brother, and hopefully that the family can look at the coincidence of that VAERS report not being related to Sean, although it's an international database for vaccine injuries. It would be incredibly unlikely. But to me, I think that's a high possibility that it was his coronary or VAERS report related to his vaccine. And his family can look at, I guess, medical forms, GPs, reports to see when he was previously vaccinated. If that was him that was vaccinated 5 days prior, then that VAERS report is related to him.
Yeah.
And then we can see accurately if his passing was potentially caused by the vaccine.
Yeah.
And even to say that, the date and times of a lot of our vaccinations aren't accurate. So
what do you mean by that?
I've had 3 vaccines.
Yeah.
One of them wasn't even in the database. I've had 3 vaccines.
Yeah.
One of them wasn't even in the database.
Oh.
So I don't think they were recorded accurately.
How are you, obviously as a sportsman, you've been tracking what's been happening with sudden deaths and things like that? Are you kind of aware that it's a thing?
Yeah, what really shocked me is that another professional rugby player, Conor Bishop, he didn't wake up from his sleep 2 weeks after I think it was around July 18th last year.
Wow.
Didn't wake up, so he would have been vaccinated 2 or 3 times, the same as I have. And Dr. McCullough says really clearly that there's a time between 3 and 6 when the normal person's adrenaline gets pumped into our blood and it helps you wake up.
Yeah.
So that would have been a state where potentially Connor's passing occurred. He was found by his uncle, I think, the next morning, later in the evening. He'd played professional Super Rugby quarterfinal a week prior.
Yeah.
And there's been no talk amongst the rugby community, management, medical staff around potential causes of his death. And like I've been a part of the rugby community for 15 years. A lot of them feel the same as me, so it's no secret.
Right.
We know that there's been excess deaths. Although a lot of the management and players don't have the confidence to speak publicly, it has affected our community.
Yeah.
And we weren't warned about the risks of the vaccine. We were only told to basically take it or you're not coming to work. Like I've got an example from the start of the 2022 Super Rugby campaign. I didn't want to get my vaccination, and the day before I went into work for the Highlanders, the doctor messaged me and said, if you don't turn up to work, you can't come in. So it's coercion into getting a medical experiment given to you, and they say there's no work for you without any process of risk assessment. So being in the Air New Zealand court case for the last few days, I've learned that although they might be liable in terms of employment issues, not going through the right processes, my employment contract didn't say that they were able to give me any medical vaccinations. but they didn't go through any process to allow me to determine whether this is safe. So there was no risk assessment for myself before the 2021 campaign.
Wow.
And I guess that's because all of our organisations that are aligned with the government had to follow the same safety and efficacy measures from MedSafe.
Yeah.
And obviously they've been inaccurate. So that the big divide with science and truth is we've got the NIH, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya saying in reviews of the Pfizer vaccine that the trials weren't done effectively.
Yeah.
Dr. Asim Malhotra also saying that these are the best cardiologists and
In the world.
professionals in the world.
Yeah.
They're saying that there was inaccurate trials, the efficacy were nothing like they were said, it's caused serious danger and death.
Yeah.
And our government and medical staff are ignoring it, pretending we have better data.
Yeah.
So, like you said at the start, the Air New Zealand case will be the start of something really big.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can come together as a community. Like I really hope that the New Zealand rugby community, Connor's family and Sean's family can see that, like I knew both those players. I coached Connor, I played with Sean. I wouldn't sit here and pretend and say something that was misleading unless I really truly believed it.
And you're not an
Something to do.
anti-vaxxer, right? You've said you've had 3 of them.
Yeah, I've had 3.
So you're doing your research now because you care about your own body and you want to know the truth of why you had to take it, right?
Yeah, well, the first vaccination I was given was an MIQ. So I was overseas between December 2019 and July 2020.
Yeah.
I decided to stay outside of the country because I didn't want to get vaccinated. I didn't want to go into lockdown. So I cruised around the States and Mexico. I didn't see any sickness. And I seen people that had had the virus and they weren't
dying.
dropping on the ground.
There wasn't field hospitals full of people, right?
Not at all.
I remember when that happened in New York and Central Park and they actually had footage that it was empty inside. That was a media show.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
That actually happened. Like I went into the hospitals in Mexico, it was dead. No one around.
No one was there. Yeah.
It wasn't, people weren't dead everywhere.
No.
There was nobody in the hospital.
That's right.
And then my experience in MIQ was I did my 13 days of 14. I got a text message the moment before we were going to, the day before we were going to leave MIQ. And that's where I was told that you must take this vaccination, otherwise you're not allowed to leave the MIQ.
And Jacinda's actually on TV saying that, saying, oh, well, they'll just have to stay in there longer. Like, basically, you're in purgatory until you're obeyed.
Exactly.
Wow, so you were stuck in all that.
I was treated like a criminal
Yes.
because I didn't want to get vaccinated with an untested vaccine that wasn't proven.
So that was your first one?
That was my first.
So you had to take one to get out?
I had to take one to get out. Like
Oh, my
imagine,
goodness.
they didn't say. I had an argument with 2 nurses and the security guard, and there was no option. This was the rules, and the undetermined timeline. How long was I going to have to stay in there? That's what I couldn't bear, so I thought I'd just take it. I didn't actually think at the time that it was dangerous as it is.
Yeah, it was more just the
realised.
point of being told that you have to.
That, but also I felt like my immune system was strong enough to withstand the virus, like
Yeah.
they say. The risk of death for a young person was something like 0.84%,
Yeah,
or
that's
risk
crazy.
of serious injury,
Yeah.
where the risk of the vaccine, I've heard from specialists around the world, is 1 in 800 death. So
But you wouldn't have known that at the time.
No,
You were just
that's-
going from I'm healthy and I don't need it.
There
Yeah.
was a lot of people like Dr. Malhotra, Dr. Malone, these are doctors from the States and the UK,
Yes.
saying that if you're strong and healthy, your immune system will be okay to...
We're better off for not having
Yeah,
it, right?
it was only elderly that needed the vaccine potentially.
Yeah.
And Dr. Malhotra presented that at the Air New Zealand trial. So
Yeah.
the other thing about the trial that we're not looking at is how can we justify the statistics around MedSafe that
Yes.
they've given our government.
Yeah.
They're not really looking at that.
Yeah.
So we're not, again, talking about the core problem of why people were aware, really good critical thinking pilots, why were they aware of the risks more than the people that are implementing the safety risk assessments
Yeah.
like in New Zealand? They weren't looking at the same science. They're not looking at
No.
the same trials, and it's not all just conspiracy theory stuff.
Yeah, there hasn't been full disclosure, and there still hasn't been full disclosure. I mean, they stopped reporting on the MedSafe database, I think, in 2023, but I was looking at that back in 2021, and there was already more people on that database, which Linda Wharton says only captures 5% of injuries are recorded on the database in New Zealand. And there were more people who had died with which they thought was related to the vaccine than had died from so-called COVID.
Well, she's saying, yeah, that's crazy to think about. I mean, haven't they? I think I read something from Linda that 65,000 injury reports have been reported, compared to was it 2,000 or 3,000 deaths?
Yes.
And how much of those are actually from the virus?
Yeah. Well, then you compare that to the people who supposedly died from COVID, and the numbers don't stack up. So you, as soon as you start looking, you know that you're smelling the rat with the media, because this should be frontline news. So, yeah. So in closing, tell me what you do now, because you're from Nelson.
From Nelson, yeah. So I had a friend, really close friend, Billy GUYTON, passed from suicide in 2023. I'm setting up a concussion community foundation. It's called the Billy GUYTON Foundation, to support people with ongoing brain TBI injuries, and it was because of reading through Billy's medical information is what drove me and motivated me to set up the foundation, because the way he was treated and not given the right diagnosis or treatment to recover from his concussion issues, it sort of explains what's going on in our medical system with brain damage as well.
Right.
And I finished my career with concussion in 2017, and I've experienced that same gaslighting. So it's really similar to the vaccination issues, inaccurate trial data.
So misdiagnosis of your condition post-concussion is what you're saying?
Yeah, well, the diagnosis that you receive with a lot of people, thousands of people in New Zealand have concussion, and then after a year, if they're still having chronic TBI symptoms, they'll get pushed over to the mental health issue.
Right.
So it's not coming back to the same core principle issue with brain damage causing these.
It's not going back to the cause.
The cause, yeah.
Yeah, they're
We just
then
like
getting
to-
blamed for having a mental health condition.
Yeah.
That's really tragic.
And it's just, I guess it's a way to mitigate risk, avoid accountability.
Yeah.
But with the brain damage thing, and with New Zealand Rugby trying to provide a good service, they also say in their language that they are providing the best service in the world. So that's the same with our government, media and medical system around the vaccine injuries.
Yeah, don't question us. We're all over this.
We're your one true source
of truth. Yeah, but don't question us.
Yeah. And to have that opinion against the world leading specialists in America, then it sort of shows we're arrogant, we're misleading people.
Yeah.
We can't be humble enough to learn from leading scientists. We're hiding something.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, is by now it's actually being proven really by their quietness on it, when there is people being harmed, that it's actually intentional.
Yeah.
There's an intentional block on certain information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a website, or do you want to let people know?
The BillyGuytonFoundation.com.
Yeah. Can you spell that? His surname?
BILLY.
Yeah.
GUYTON, GUYTON Foundation.
Great. And you're based in
Nelson.
In Nelson.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It's so amazing to meet you. And definitely when that Afiso Collins video went out, you got a lot of attention, just going back to that in closing, because you spoke in a way that a lot of us speak, or want to speak to people that we want to help, to offer some information that they know, that isn't getting done anywhere else. And it's not done in a hateful way, and it's not done in a blaming way, but you did it in a really loving and graceful way. And I think in that moment, you captured the hearts of thousands and thousands of people around the country. So I just want to really thank you for your humility and your honesty and your curiosity, to stay curious, and just your heart for helping people of New Zealand. So
thank you so much, Penny, and great to meet you.
Yeah.
I do hope that like the message that we share can bring people together instead of blaming the people that haven't been able to see the truth yet.
Yeah, 100%.
But I do hope that people that can't quite see it clearly don't get defensive and try and be curious, because otherwise we're not going to get through this anytime soon.
No, we're not going to get through it when we're still seeing each other as oppositional. We've got to come together and just have a conversation, right? And and that starts with humility, and grace. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, cheers.